Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Jennifer Miele, Chief Communications Officer and Managing Director of Evangelization of the Diocese of Greensburg.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele. Very happy to be back here once again, hosting the show to talk about a very important organization in our community, and that is Achieva. Here to tell us a little bit about Achieva, some upcoming events they're having, and how you can support the organization is Lisa Raza. She's the Director of Communications for Achieva, and their new CEO, Steve Sorovico. Did I say that right? Sorovico?
Sorovic, but that's okay.
Sorovic. Okay, Steve Sorovic. Very excited to talk to you both. Thank you so much for being here today. Steve, I'm going to begin with you, if you don't mind. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where your education took you, and how you ended up as CEO of Achieva?
Sure. I was born and raised up in Erie, Pennsylvania, up in the northwestern corner of the state. And I got connected to disability issues because my sister, I'm the youngest of seven, and my sister, Paula, who was just a couple years older than me, developed MS at a pretty young age. And I sort of, I watched her go from someone who didn't have a disability to someone who did have a disability, and really was able to observe how, society really does put up, barriers and obstacles in front of people with disabilities. And this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, where her disability started to manifest. And so, she wanted to live her life like anyone else and go to college and go to, get a job. And there were lots of things that were barriers to her being able to do that. And so it just kind of piqued my interest. I kind of observed that and how my family, had to deal with the matter. And so I got into disability issues. And after growing up in Erie, was in the Air Force, went to college, got out, came down to University of Pittsburgh and got my master's degree in public and international affairs. Was able to get an internship and later a job with then Congressman Tom Ridge, who was my congressman from Erie at the time. Was able to spend a few years in Washington on Capitol Hill. It was actually right after the ADA was passed, and got to work on disability issues, among other things. And when Congressman Ridge became governor of Pennsylvania, I went, I followed him up to Harrisburg and was able to get a job within state government in public policy, doing disability policy and among other things. And so I was able to have some influence in state government in terms of, things that the executive branch could do for people with disabilities, advising on legislation and things that the governor's office might support, working with the General Assembly. And so after various and sundry positions within state government, I was able to then become executive director of the ARC of Pennsylvania, which is a state chapter of the ARC. And they do systems advocacy and do advocacy for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I did that for about 7+ years. Went back to state government, working in the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation and then the Office of Developmental Programs, rather. And those two programs are state programs that help people with disabilities live their life in the community, get jobs, regular jobs in the community, competitive integrated jobs. And those two programs are statewide and do a lot of good things for people with disabilities and their families. And so I was able to spend some time doing that. And then about 3-4 years ago, I had learned that Marcia Blanco, who had been president and CEO of Achieva for nearly 40 years, was retiring. And I threw my hat in the ring and didn't expect to get the position, but I got it. And 3.5 years later, here I am.
Well, you're hardly new at this point then. You're a pro and you have just a wonderful career, and what an inspiring story you have about your sister. That must have been very difficult. May I ask how she is?
You may ask, and she actually passed away in 2004. And basically of complications of MS. She had primary progressive form of MS. And so it really did make, just daily living very challenging for her. But the positive news about the whole situation was that before the ADA and before a lot of the programs that are available to Pennsylvanians with disabilities today were in place, oftentimes it was just in institutional settings or nursing homes were available to people. And my sister was, obviously very young at the time, in her early 20s. And I remember there was a point where there really were no home and community-based services available to people like her, people with disabilities like her. And she ended up having to spend time in a county nursing home up in Erie for a short time. We did everything we could. We got her out and got her set up with some services. But I guess it's a long way of saying at the time, there really wasn't a lot of home and community-based services available to people. And starting in, the early 90s and progressing over the next 30 years, state and federal government programs have developed and have grown. I'm happy to say that, institutional settings are the exception now and not the norm. But when my sister passed away in 2004, she had her own apartment. She had attendants who helped her get out of bed every morning, helped her, bathe, grocery shop, prepare her meals. She was literally really dependent, almost 100% on people coming in and helping her. But I say the good news is because she, even though her life ended too soon, she was living the life that she wanted to live, living independently in her own apartment, and directing the support services that she had come into her place, thanks to the publicly funded programs that were available.
I'm very appreciative of you sharing that story because I think it speaks volumes about your background and your commitment to what you're doing. Also on the line with us today is Lisa Raza, and she's the Director of Communications for Achieva. Lisa, I can tell by your personality, you were a born communicator. Tell us about where you grew up, your education, and how your career took you here.
Thanks, Jen. Sure. So I was born and raised in Westmoreland County in the town of Mount Pleasant. I attended Seton Hill, what was then Seton Hill College, and of course is now Seton Hill University, and received my degree in graphic design and communications. And so for the majority of my career, I spent at a local advertising agency in Greensburg called Studio 2 Advertising. It was great there. I really, really enjoyed it. Got to work with a lot of diverse clients, but similar to Steve, some life experiences kind of affected my future in professional development. So my youngest son, I have two boys, Reed and Ramsey, and my youngest son was born with a congenital birth defect, which was quite a scary time for us. The prognosis was not good. The day that he was born, we were told that he had no chance of surviving. And unfortunately he did. And he's 10 years old now, but that experience changed me. And while I still enjoyed the work that I did, I wanted to find work for a nonprofit where I could basically give back and be rewarded by my career. So it actually took me about 5 years until eventually I saw a position at Achieva. At the time, I applied for a communications manager position. And fortunately, that worked out. And been here almost 5 years now. And I really love what I do. It's kind of the best of both worlds to really be able to support people with disabilities and raise awareness about Achieva, as well as continuing my work in communications and design.
Wonderful. So, Steve, what would you want people to know who are just hearing about Achieva, who may not be intimately connected with this world? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the organization and the operations?
Sure. So Achieva has been around 70 years. In fact, we are celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. This organization was started in 1951, and the whole point about mentioning it is just to make sure people understand that we've been around and we know what we're doing. And it's not just some organization that was created a couple years ago. We've been around for 7 decades. We've evolved over that time. We started out as an organization. We still are a part of the ARC movement, I mentioned I worked for the Arc of Pennsylvania for a number of years. Achieva started out as the Arc of Allegheny County, and it also has over the years affiliated with the Arc of Westmoreland County and the Arc of Beaver County. And so our organization is very much part of the Arc movement. There's chapters of the Arc all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across the country, quite frankly, and we're connected with the Arc of the United States and the Arc of Pennsylvania. So we have a deep history, roots with the Arc movement, which it was an organization that really started for families and individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And it started back, 70 years ago. You can imagine there really wasn't much available for young people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And oftentimes little children would grow up and as kids, they'd try to go to school, public education, and the local schools were not required by law to serve kids with intellectual disabilities. I mean, some schools might have, a lot of schools did not. And what ultimately happened would, if you couldn't go to school, a lot of, docs in the system would really, tell parents, well, your son or daughter has a intellectual disability, and so you're going to have to put them in an institution. And so that's how a lot of people ended up in state-run institutions. Even today, we still have 4 remaining. A lot of them have closed, thank goodness. And thousands of people have been moved out of those institutions into the community, but we still have 4 of them operating today. But 70 years ago, there really wasn't much around. And so parents would be told, put your son or daughter with an intellectual disability into an institution, and that's the best thing you could do. And a lot of parents did that. They thought they were doing the right thing. Well, parents who started and families who started this organization, they wanted more. They wanted more for their kids. And so they created, again, what was known as the Arc of Allegheny County, and affiliated with some other chapters of the Arc movement across the state and country. They started to really just advocate for their kids. That's one of the things that's really foundational to our organization at Achieva, is that we do advocacy, and that means helping young people with intellectual disabilities, or any disability, quite frankly, and their parents and their family members to advocate. And often that just means, helping figure out the system. Maybe if the publicly funded system has a waiting list, we can help that person or that family understand the system and maybe advocate with with the county human services department or with their elected official. So we do a lot of advocacy. And then we, over the years, the parents back then decided, well, the services that we want aren't available. And so we're going to create them, and we're going to start running programs in our local area and provide services that the system is not offering. And so this organization developed all kinds of services. We have evolved over the years. We've developed new services, more innovative, person-centered services. We've sort of closed and moved on past some services that were more congregate and isolating for people. We didn't want to just run, programs where people with disabilities would show up, spend all their whole day doing nothing else but, being in a program with other people with disabilities. We wanted them to experience what the community has to offer. And that's, over time, moving, fast forward to today, we offer services for young children starting at birth. We offer early intervention services for kids, birth to age 3. We do advocacy for kids in special education. We offer services as adults, ranging from offering them a place to live, or helping them buy their own house or rent their own house, arranging staff going from, maybe just a few hours a day to 24/7, 365 days a week. We'll staff licensed community homes and support people. We help people get, real jobs in the community, making good wages. They call that competitive integrated employment. That's just a fancy word for a real job with real wages in the community. So we help people, identify what they want to be and what they want to do with their life. We help them envision a life of, personal significance for them, and we help them arrange services to support them in meeting those needs. So again, started out 70 years ago as just a group of families wanting more for their kids, more than a state-run institution. And we've evolved over the 70 years to being what I believe is the best human services organization for persons with any disability, helping them live the life of personal significance that they want, and helping their families support their loved ones, and also save resources and build resources to help support them throughout their life.
Steve Surovic is the CEO of Achieva. He's joining me today with Lisa Raza, the Director of Communications for Achieva. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. We'll be right back.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele, here today with two wonderful people from Achieva who are passionate about the work they're doing to assist individuals who are living with mental and physical disabilities to live a better life, achieve all that they want to achieve. That's why I like the branding of Achieva so much. I've always been a fan of that. I think it's fantastic. So I'm here today with Lisa Raza. She's the Director of Communications for Achieva, and the CEO, Steve Surovic. Wonderful people. I've enjoyed talking to you so far. It's been very interesting. Lisa, I know it's important to you to get to a couple of community events that are coming up because you do want more people to be aware and to support the cause. So why don't we start by talking about your open house?
Thank you. We are excited to be hosting an open house. Our Greensburg location, which was previously on Donahue Road, has now moved to Route 30. It's conveniently located in the old Pier 1 building at 5129 Route 30. And so on September 2nd, we're excited to be hosting the event. WHJB Radio will actually be there. Laura Kay will be hosting. We will have prizes and giveaways, of course, some great food. And we will have a ribbon cutting with the local Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce at 11:30. So all of that information can be found on our website under events or on our homepage. And we're just excited to welcome everyone to our new location and to find out more about what Achieva offers.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Yes, I think everybody in Greensburg was wondering what the new sort of tenants to that building were going to be on Route 30. So it's wonderful to see. That's fantastic visibility as well. I think it's a great location.
I agree. It's been a great change. I know there's been a lot of word around town about it. So we're excited about that. And then a second event, which I wanted to talk about, is our annual $1 Million Golf Outing. Always a great event in September. This year, September 20th at the Valley Brook Country Club. So anyone that might be interested in a great day of golf benefiting our organization, the people that we support ultimately benefit from it. It will be a wonderful day of golf and prizes at Valley Brook Country Club.
Well, it's called the $1 Million Golf Outing. I assume there's some significance to that.
Yes, so 3 lucky golfers will be randomly selected to shoot for a $1 million hole-in-one.
Oh my, that is wonderful. Has it ever happened?
Not to my knowledge, but boy, I would sure love to witness that. Wouldn't that be great?
It does happen. I will tell you from personal experience. I was at a golf outing with a woman from Excella Health where I used to work, and she got a hole-in-one and won a car. It really does happen. So there you go. It's nice to know.
Well, I hope that could happen this year.
That sounds fantastic. So that information as well, is that available on your website?
Yes, anyone can access that information about all of our events and all about Achieva services at achieva.info. That's achieva.info.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, Steve, I'm going to take it back over to you now because advocacy, you've been talking about advocacy so much and how it's sort of a core mission of the organization and where you are. What are some of the major advocacy issues that you're taking up right now, be it in Harrisburg or in Washington?
Thanks for that question. There's never a shortage of issues, believe it or not. We'd love to put ourselves out of business at some point in terms of needing to do advocacy. But in addition to that individualized advocacy that I talked about earlier, we do what we call a systems advocacy. And that just means we are often engaged in discussing and educating our elected officials. And so, yes, we are in Harrisburg, our state capital, and we also have folks in Washington, D.C., and we do a lot of advocacy with our members of Congress and our 2 U.S. senators. Obviously, the main issue right now is it's been a challenge getting and keeping direct support professionals, believe it or not. I mean, that's really what our primary service is providing those direct supports to people, as I was talking about earlier. And we have great staff. We have great, we call them DSPs for short, direct support professionals. We have wonderful DSPs. We have often a lot of DSPs who join our organization and will stay literally for decades. I mean, I've had retirement events for people who have been here 40 years being a DSP, starting out at the lowest rung of the ladder and sticking it out for 40 years because they love their job and love supporting people with disabilities so much. At the same time, we are a primarily government funded system. I mean, 95% of our revenue comes from state and federal funding sources, Medicaid specifically. So whenever people talk about a single payer healthcare system, well, we're a single payer home and community-based system. And that means that we are nearly 95 to 100% dependent on what the state and federal government will pay us for the services that we offer. They establish rates, and oftentimes those rates will stay pretty flat. Lately, due to some of the dynamics of our economy and some of the dynamics that have been injected into our economy based on unemployment benefits, we often are having challenges attracting and retaining DSPs. And so that's our primary business, is serving people. And we need people to join us and to stick around to do quality work. And so that's one of our biggest challenges right now. And we've been doing a lot of advocacy with the state and federal government in terms of the funding, the stimulus funding that they've both already put in, passed, and trying to earmark some of those funds to support organizations like ours so that we can increase the wages and increase the compensation for our DSPs so that we can compete, with the other with other parts of the economy where wages and compensation and benefits have steadily increased. We need to stay competitive with them, and we are very dependent on the government public funded sources for those wages. And so that's our primary issue right now.
Yeah, it's a serious one. You're not alone. I mean, you're not alone in that, healthcare and the direct support professionals being difficult to find is probably across the board.
One thing I would say, it's a great profession. It's a rewarding profession. We have wonderful people doing DSP work for us. And as I said, many people often stay decades. And the few times, when people do leave, we always do, an exit interview, and without fail, we'll ask them, what'd you like most about your job? And without fail, they say, working with people with disabilities. It's such a rewarding job. And so it's a great job. I'm not going to say it's an easy job, but it's a very rewarding job. And so one of the biggest advocacy issues that we have going right now with our state and federal elected officials is making sure that the publicly funded systems adequately compensate DSPs and the organizations that hire DSPs so that we can attract and retain the best DSPs possible.
Fantastic. That is, really a hot button issue for sure. And I'm glad to know that you're advocating for that as well. It's important also for people to understand the value of them supporting this organization as well, because you're creating that independence for so many people. So, Steve, what do you tell people if they want to get involved, if they would like to donate? How does all that work?
Sure. I always encourage people to, go to our website. Lisa mentioned it. It's achieva.info. There's opportunities to donate. There's opportunities to come to our events. Some people don't like to just write checks. They like to come to an event. Lisa's mentioned the golf outing, and we have other events, annual auctions, where people can donate things, donate items or trips. And then we'll put those up for auction at a charity auction toward the end of the year. People can call our main number and ask if they want to volunteer. They can always do something like that. But obviously, just getting engaged, attending our events, making a donation is always very much appreciated. We were talking about the systemic advocacy. If you sign up for our newsletter or sign up for our action alerts, we can keep you informed about issues going on in Harrisburg and DC. And then oftentimes we'll say, action is needed. And so at the very least, you could pick up the phone and call one of your elected officials or send them an email and say you support these issues. Please vote to support people with disabilities. So that's another way. If you don't like going to events or writing big checks, you can just sign up for our newsletter and get information and stay connected with your elected officials in support of our issues.
Steve Surovic is the CEO of Achieva. Today, he was joined by Lisa Raza, the Director of Communications for Achieva. As a reminder, for those of you who have been listening, they have a golf outing coming up, as well as an open house at their new Greensburg location on Route 30 in the old Pier 1 building. So make sure you check out their website. That's achieva.info. So very good. You guys were wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to talk to us here on WHJB. I can assure you our listeners are much more well-informed because of your excellent presentation today. Thank you both.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jen.
You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.